All right, so here we go with lecture 3, which definitely draws from all 3 of the books, as do really lectures 1 and lecture 2. Hopefully, this will help you understand why it's important to get and memorize all those characteristics or correspondences of each of the 5 elements. So, again, it's about understanding relationships. 5-element theory exemplifies change and underscores the idea that everything in the universe is cyclical in nature. Everything is always changing, and 5-element theory gives us the reasons for why those changes take place. So, to jump straight into it, well, actually, let me stop for a second before I jump straight into it and say that this is a synthetic, man-made theory. It is dialectical. It promotes the idea of relationships, just the way yin and yang theory does, but it is man-made. There's 5 elements. We could talk about the nature of the relationships among all of the elements. The Chinese chose to speak about them in the way that I'm about to speak, and so don't torture yourself wondering about every possible relationship. Water could have a relationship with 4 other elements. We're gonna, for now, focus on the relationship between water and wood. So what happens when you water a plant? It grows, right? So Chinese medicine would say that water supports wood, or supports the growth of wood. What's the nature of the relationship between wood and fire? Or what does wood do to fire? It promotes it. It provides fuel for the fire to burn. So to use the word that we're going to sort of stick with, supporting or promoting, wood supports fire, wood promotes fire. And when the fire is done, what are you left with? You're left with basically dirt, right? You're left with earth. So fire promotes the creation of earth. So just as a little bit of an aside, something that I think is kind of interesting in this observation, in a lot of ecosystems, fire is an essential element to create the right conditions for plants to grow. So they have to have the right chemicals in the soil, which are left over after there's ash. They have to have the right amount of temperature, and then of course heat and light and all that other, or light and rain and all that other stuff. But I just think it's kind of interesting that you need to have earth and dirt to grow a plant, and you get some of that earth and dirt from fire. And where does metal come from? All right, I'm going to agree that this one is a lot more of a stretch. It's kind of reaching a little bit, but we get metal from mines in the middle of the earth, from a copper mine or a gold mine. So in Chinese thinking, earth promotes metal. That's not exactly the same kind of relationship, say, between water and wood. It's not like earth is necessarily doing anything to the metal, but it's still the same concept that to get metal, we have to have earth. So earth promotes or supports metal. All right, the next one, metal. So this one is really a stretch. I will totally admit to it. Remember that when these theories were being developed, this was a non-technological society. Ancient Chinese people, even 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, did not understand the idea of condensation, of water condensing out of the air, water vapor condensing out of the air. So if you go outside on a cool fall morning, there's all kinds of condensation all over your car. The metal is colder than the air around it, so the water condenses on the metal. Chinese people, in a non-technological frame of reference, did not see that. They simply thought that the water came from the metal. So in traditional Chinese medicine, metal promotes water. Metal's typically colder than the air around it, and that coldness promotes condensation, and again, to their way of thinking, metal promotes water. And yes, I know it is a bit of a stretch, but keep in mind that non-technological piece, and it's a little bit less of a stretch. So when you put all those piece by piece relationships together and you string them all together, water promotes wood, promotes fire, promotes earth, promotes metal, promotes water, back to the beginning. We call it the promoting cycle, sometimes called the mother-son cycle. And here it is in sum total. You will often see this picture or some variant of it drawn this way: the pentagram, the arrows, water promoting wood, promoting fire, promoting earth. The arrows, of course, indicate the direction of influence on the next element. Now, we could draw 4 arrows reaching out from water to wood, water to fire, water to earth, water to metal. I'm not going to dig that hole quite so deeply. We are going to do one other cycle, but we're not going to make it too terribly complicated. So think about yin and yang theory. Think back to yin and yang. So yin is the shady side of the slope, or the less than characteristic, and yang is the sunny side of the slope, or the more active, more than side of the or characteristic. So do you think the promoting cycle is yin or yang? Hopefully you said yang. So if everything is yang and there's no yin, is that a balanced and harmonious picture, or balanced and harmonious situation, or is it disharmonious and imbalanced? Correct. It is imbalanced. So if there's a promoting cycle that drives everything forward, there has to be something else in addition to that to bring balance to it, and that's what we call the controlling cycle. So promoting is very yang, it drives things forward, it builds things up. Controlling, as the name suggests, holds things back, slows them down, creates balance. So in this case, water controls fire. That's not too complicated. We fight fire with water every day. Not a lot to say about that. Fire, this one's a little more interesting. Fire controls metal. So if you've ever been to like a blacksmith shop, or I know a bunch of you are horse people, so if you've seen a horse shod, hot shoeing is the way to shape the horseshoe to be just exactly what you want it to be. You melt it in a forge. Fire brings metal under control. So after you've forged that iron into something useful, a useful tool such as an axe, the metal that you've created is used to control wood. So again, that's really not such a stretch when you think about the comparisons. What's the blade of an axe made of? It's made of metal. What do you do with an axe? You control wood. You fell trees, you chop off limbs, you split firewood. So metal controls wood. All right, so what does wood control? This one, I think at first blush, is a little bit of a stretch, but not that big. So think about, have you ever been walking down the sidewalk and there's some giant tree root that's split the concrete and it's buckled up and you trip over it? Well, there are few things that can control the earth the way the roots of a tree can. Slowly, surely, steadily, tree roots will push their way out through the dirt. Molecule at a time, one cell at a time, slow, steady growth, to the point where it will crack a sidewalk. It's so powerful that it will crack a sidewalk. On the other hand, you couldn't crack a sidewalk unless you went at it pretty darn hard with a sledgehammer or dropping something really heavy on it. Wood works a little differently. It's persistent and it's insistent, and it gets what it wants. So earth, this is a good one. I like this one. It's pretty obvious. Earth controls water. So when you're a little kid and you're playing in a dirt pile and you want to make a mud puddle, you build a little moat, not a moat, you build a little berm around in the dirt so that you can fill up with water to make a puddle. So you can think of the banks of a river or a pond. Earth controls water. Earth contains water. Otherwise, water is going to spread out and go just exactly where it likes, right? Water spreads, it stays low, it fills up whatever space it can without having something to contain it, such as dirt, earth. And so the sum total of the controlling cycle of the 5 elements, I like to, oops, I forgot to delete a little text box there. Oops, oh well. I like to keep the elements in the same order, water, wood, fire, earth, metal, so that you can see the difference in the shape that you end up with. A pentagram versus a pentacle. It's not that big a deal. I just think it's a nice little visual. I think it's easier for people to learn it if everything just, the elements themselves stay in the same order and the arrows point in a different direction. So the controlling cycle of the 5 elements.